What is racism? There is no other question that I'm asked more than this one. Many of us who live near whites will be asked this one time and time again. I don't think that there are many more important questions to answer, especially for black people, than this one. There have been many attempts to do so, and many better people than I have done so very clearly and satisfactorily. That said, with all due humility and in full awareness that I may get it wrong, here's what Mr. Mark Black thinks. This question is impossible to answer without answering an even more important question. That question isn't what is racism, but why is racism? After all, the what's of racism become crystal clear once we understand why racism exists. Before my white listeners even go there, I'll say it again. Racism exists in America right now. Today. See? That didn't hurt so bad. Dr. Neely Fuller said in his book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook/workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, white supremacy, quote, "If you don't understand racism, what it is and how it works, everything that you do understand will only confuse you." Man, was he right. Even the dictionaries get it wrong and confuse the shit out of us. Oxford Dictionary defines racism as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Of course, it says nothing about why one would just come to believe one's own ethnicity is superior or why someone would think this. It's not as if whites, a term that is relatively recent itself, woke up one day and thought, yeah, I'm feeling extra superior today. Let's go harass some darkies. This belief was inculcated for a reason, and I believe I know why. Let's get a few things straight right out of the gate, shall we? Racism isn't when people don't like you because of your ethnicity. That's bigotry, and we're all capable of it. Racism isn't just when you can't live around whites or get harassed in stores, or even when you're pulled over and harassed by the cops. It's not found in you being denied a job because you were under/overqualified, or that home loan you wanted only seemed to qualify you to live in certain neighborhoods, even though you could afford to live where you want. Those are symptoms of racism, not racism itself. Even the belief itself means nothing without a system of putting that belief into practice. That's why all of our efforts to understand racism has only muddied and confused the issue. We need some clarity, and so I think it's time that we strike at the root. Define racism at its source. Here's the definition that I work with, and it has served me in good stead, people. Racism is the systematic use of every area of human activity to create and sustain the capability of whites to control as many black resources, as much black labor, and as many black lives as possible for the purpose of their own survival. Yes, my people, racism is definitely a black-white thing. Beliefs are tools. Discrimination is a tool. Prejudice, antagonism, and even murder is a tool of racism, white supremacy, not the definition of it. Because we never focused on why it is, we couldn't define what it is. Why do I not talk about other so-called minorities? Why do I only act like black people experience these things? Very good questions. Here's why. What would you say is the one difference between blacks and other non-white ethnic groups outside of our levels of melanin? The singular difference between us and any other group is that every other ethnic group has a homeland. Whether Latino, Asian, or white, every group that comes here came from somewhere else. Why would this make a difference? Because let's say an asteroid flies overhead and whites in the West lose their minds and start killing non-whites en masse. Now, before you laugh at the improbability of that statement, remember Germany, 1938, okay? Latinos would stream back across the border in droves. they've still been able, in many cases, to maintain families, relationships, business contacts, and other social intercourse in their homelands. For the Asians, it would take them a while longer to get home, but they have the same ability. Even Native Americans have their reservations that they can wall off and defend. Only my people have nowhere to go. Good or bad, this is home. We don't have nations that we belong to. We were Asante, Mende, Yoruba, Fulani, or Biafran among many other peoples before we came here. After years of slavery, with hardly any intercourse at all with Africa, and some degree of admixture with Europeans, we are a people without a homeland. This makes us the most wonderful captive audience in the capitalism show, and this is why racism exists. There's no better system to put in place to ensure, no matter what changes or who's in charge, captive black labor, capital, and resources are hoovered up into the hands of whites for their collective betterment and survival. That's it. That's the matrix. I know, not all of you are rich. I get that. It's the one thing my white compatriots retreat to when I press home the issue of capital. Here's why it's no defense. The white folks who stole the lion's share still own the most lucrative businesses and pay the highest amount in taxes, although less than earlier in the 20th century. Those ill-gotten gains trickle down to all whites through selective employment, through government benefits that my people find themselves shut out of, and wealth inherited from generations back that has grown in value and was stolen in many cases. Here's a couple of examples to make my point. If black male life expectancy is about 72 years old on average, why do we have to wait until 67 for Social Security? We pay into it for years, only to have many of us die before we can even take advantage of it. Here's another way we're locked out. Many of my white friends and family, trying to be helpful, will say to me, if more black people would go to college, they could work their way out of poverty. Great idea. Here's an idea that can only be described as freakonomics. Black people who use drugs at a rate comparable to that of whites, 10.5% and 9.5% respectively as of 2013, are arrested at over 3 times the rate of whites for drugs. Now, why does this matter? If you were smoking a little herb while in school and end up with a drug conviction, you lose eligibility for federal student aid. This wouldn't keep a black person from going to college, would it? Maybe not. However, this means taking out loans to go to school so that by the time they graduate, a black felon will start off in the hole before they ever get ahead. Combine this with the endemic double unemployment rate of black folk, and this is a blow many of us never recover from. Have you all noticed the trend yet? Each of these things have nothing to do with who likes us or lives near us. It's all economic. Racism is designed to keep capital away from the one labor force that whites, other than themselves, can rely on no matter what. Everything else is secondary, or to be more precise, peripheral to maintaining control of the capital, labor, and persons of black folk. However, if I knew nothing else about how racism plays out, I only have to pay close attention to what happens when I mention economics in any discussion of racism. People who were perfectly on board when we were talking about black respectability, like pulling our pants up, speaking proper English, and so on, become immediately hostile at the mere mention that America has stolen from black folk and needs to return the booty, not just talk nice to us. I hear variations of, that was long ago. You were never a slave. My family were immigrants. Why do I owe you anything? And so on. The conversation is over at that point. No one wants to discuss black folks' dire need for capital and a land base. Our 40 acres and a mule, so to speak. I don't have time to describe all the ways whites have found to benefit from captive black wealth, but trust me, it's a lot. At this point, I think we understand clearly what racism is, but more importantly, how to solve the problem. That will be for another Q&A, as I'm sure someone will ask, how do we fix the issue? Until the next time, keep those questions coming, and remember, you can always ask a brother. Peace.